Minister, last night your government shamefully voted against a legislation that was brought forward by myself and Mary Lou MacDonald that would end the practice of the sale of Israeli war bonds being facilitated by the Irish Central Bank. I would like you to take this opportunity to outline to the Irish people the role that Ireland has in facilitating the sale of these war bonds. What would it mean, for example, if the Central Bank did not approve their perspectives in relation to the sale of war bonds, which in reality aren't war bonds? This is a genocide that is happening and which, unfortunately, Ireland is now complicit in actually financing through these war bonds.
As I have already outlined in the House earlier this week, the Central Bank does not sell or oversee the sale of Israeli bonds. It is important to be clear in the House as to the role of the Central Bank, as it has been misrepresented repeatedly. To be clear again, the Central Bank's role under EU legislation is to assess the bond prospectus to ensure that it includes all the disclosure requirements of the EU prospectus regulation. Neither the issuer, in this case the State of Israel, nor the financial products becomes regulated or endorsed as a result of the assessment. The Central Bank is designated as the Irish competent authority for the approval of securities prospectuses under the relevant regulation. As the competent authority, the Central Bank is responsible for assessing whether a prospectus has been drawn up in compliance with the disclosure requirements of the regulation. Once the bank is satisfied that the issuer has disclosed the required information in the required manner as set out in the regulation, so that investors can make an informed investment decision, there's no discretion and it must approve it. It is important to reiterate that by approving a prospectus, it does not endorse the issuer or the securities. The Central Bank have been clear that they can only refuse the approval of a prospectus once they have the legal basis to do so. And the Governor of the Central Bank, in his correspondence to the Joint Committee on Finance, Public Expenditure and Reform and the Department of the Taoiseach, set out this view. The Government's position on the matter has been clear, and I have set it out to the House during the week.
Said is not true. You said that there's no discretion for the Central Bank when the information in the prospectus is accurate, that they must approve it. That isn't the case. What you fail to admit is what the Governor of the Central Bank said, is that there's 3 ways that they can not approve it. 1, that the information is insufficient in the prospectus. 2, the existence of EU sanctions prohibiting the provision of services or assistance in connection with the issuance of securities by the Israeli government, or national restrictive measures to the same effect. And that's what we're dealing with. So you can dance around all these words all you want. For example, you say they're not regulated. Nobody's suggesting that these war bonds, genocide bonds, are regulated. Nobody is also just suggesting that it is the Central Bank or the Governor that is selling them. It is the State of Israel that is selling them. But they can't sell them without being facilitated by the Irish Central Bank. And when the Irish Central Bank approved the prospectus, and they approved the prospectus because your government will not provide restrictive measures, then those bonds are not only sold here but throughout Europe. It is shameful, Pascal, in relation to what your government has done, and you should, even at this stage, revisit this issue.
So I'm glad you've restated your view, because it is important to be precise in relation to the role of the Central Bank. Your exact word in relation to this issue, which you've just restated again, is that the bonds are being sold through the Irish Central Bank. They were your words in this debate on Tuesday night. The leader of Sinn Féin went on to say that we're allowing the Irish Central Bank to trade in Israeli bonds. You know that's not the truth. You know that is not the case. The Central Bank of Ireland is neither selling nor trading in these bonds. And I invite you now to correct the record, because what you have done is state something that is not the case. Your words were very clear. The Central Bank, the bonds are being sold through the Irish Central Bank. They were your words. the words of Mary Lou MacDonald, is the Irish Central Bank is trading in bonds. So they are your words. I invite you to correct the record.
Your response is pathetic. Your response is pathetic. The facts are, and you know it, the central bank has facilitated the sale of Israeli war bonds. That is a fact. Nobody in this House disputes that. The fact is the governor said to stop that, he needs national restrictive measures. The fact is your government won't do it. Now, maybe you had another call with an Israeli minister to ensure him that that legislation also wouldn't go through. Remember that call that you denied never happened, but it appears in leaked information from the ministry in Israel. But the fact is, Pascal, the fact is, Minister, these war bonds are being sold. The fact is, if it wasn't for the central bank, they wouldn't be able to be sold, not only in Ireland, but in other countries throughout Europe. That is the fact, and the fact is your government are allowing that to happen. And it isn't a minor issue. It isn't an issue about words. It is a fact that genocide is happening right before our eyes, and you have made a decision, and your government has made a decision, to not intervene in areas where you can intervene, where we have the powers under EU law to issue using the policy exemption to make sure that the free trade of capital can be restricted at a national level.
You didn't respond back to my point. I laid out very clear your words. Now, very interestingly, when Deputy Martin Kenny stood up, he then said, we are not suggesting that they are being sold by the Irish Central Bank. We're not suggesting any of that. In your debate, in your contribution on Tuesday night, both you and the leader of Sinn Féin referred to the bonds being sold through the Central Bank of Ireland, which is not the case. And you refer to the Central Bank of Ireland trading in bonds, not the case. And I think it's so important, as I attempt to continue to recognise the suffering of the people of Gaza and the many practical steps that the Government of Ireland is taking to aid them, to give them support, that we also deal in the truth. In relation to the final allegation that was made there by Deputy MacDonald, Deputy Doherty, let me again state to the House that no such call was received by me. I have made that very clear. I find it very interesting that you're more willing to accept the word of the Department of Finance of Israel than me.
Okay, so Bogamuj Arai Huig an Cheist Era Arisht in Anam an Chachta O Doherty.
Maybe his response to this question won't be as pathetic. Won't be as pathetic because your words will ring hollow to the children who are being ripped apart in Gaza, and the bombs and the bullets are funded because Israeli bonds are being facilitated through the Irish Central Bank, and you're the Minister for Finance who can actually stop that. Disgraceful. But I'm asking you to explain the steps you're taking to address the situation where insurance companies here are recording profits that are multiples of our European competitors.
Here, look, I want to call out the behaviour of Deputy Doherty here. Your language, the way you're attempting to treat this such serious issue, it's tuggish. It's tuggish, your behaviour. The leader of Sinn Féin yesterday referred to harassing the government on this issue. I come into this House, I attempt to deal.
As a point of order, you're making accusations against somebody who can't defend themselves. It was the Taoiseach who made that accusation, and I will not accept you calling me a thug or my behaviour thuggish while you protect and you defend the situation where Israeli war bonds are here. I will not stand and allow you to suggest that I am thuggish in that manner, because we know what this is all about, Pascal, and this is far, Minister, this is far too important, and I will not allow you to characterise my behaviour or standing up for what I believe in that way.
So I can stand up for what I believe, but I can do so in a way that is respectful of the views of others. I can make the case for what I believe in without constantly interrupting and demeaning the good intentions of others. And for the record, I used the words of Deputy MacDonald yesterday. That was the word she used. Despite everything, I still try to respect your good intentions, Deputy Doherty, despite the many reasons I shouldn't. I simply ask for you to do the same of me. In relation to the very important matter that you're raising here today, I recognise the concerns on profitability levels in certain segments of the market. Structural reform and ensuring the long-term affordability and sustainability of the Irish insurance market, while ensuring a viable insurance sector, are priorities for this government. The insurance market's profitability in 2022 and 2023 was supported by significant reserve releases following the COVID-19 pandemic. After a number of years of losses, the National Claims Information Database data shows that the insurance market was profitable again in 2023. For liability insurance, the operating profit was 13% in 2023, and the long-term average operating profit was 2.1% between 2009 and 2023. The motor insurance market had an 8% profit in 2023, with a long-term average profit of around 5% between 2009 and 2023. Globally, 2023 was characterised as a hard market with higher premiums, stricter underwriting conditions and higher reinsurance costs. In contrast, industry insights suggest that 2024 showed a softening market with increasing competition and falling rates which have translated into lower premia in some market segments, but further work is needed. That is why the government is developing a new action plan for insurance reform, which will prioritise further competition in the market, include further work, including with the insurers themselves, to enhance transparency and promote affordability across all types of insurance. My department has concluded a public consultation and is now reviewing the various submissions.
Minister, the question I keep on raising here is when is the government going to deal with the issue of costs that people are paying, whether it's motor insurance, whether it's home insurance, whether it's public liability insurance, your sports groups, your organisations, your community groups, your small businesses, the length and breadth of the state. The profits that the industry are making are eye-watering. When the industry came before our committee, the Finance Committee, they told us that they would target a 4 to 5%, not a 4 to 5% over the last 10 years or 20 years, a 4 to 5%, because that is the industry norm. What is happening here, what these companies are making, and they've seen their premiums go up, and we've seen double-digit profit margins now for the last 3 years. And that's on the back of premiums going up. But the margins that they're making are 2 and 3 times the European average. So all the reforms that have been introduced in this House that I have supported, but I argued at the time that those reforms cannot be about boosting the profits of the industry. They have to be about putting money back into consumers' pockets, and that is where you are failing over and over and over again.
So thanks, Deputy, for raising that issue and acknowledging the scale of reform that the government has brought in and your own role in it, which I'll acknowledge. I want to acknowledge the Consumer Insurance Contract Bill of 2019, which was a motion that you brought in. Part of it is not yet commenced, but most of the legislation has been. The various measures that the government has brought in, from the Personal Injuries Guideline, the reform of the Personal Injuries Resolution Board Act of 2022, the banning of price walking, establishing an office to promote competition, the publication by the Central Bank of its National Claims Information Database, the work that has been done by the CCPC, the establishment of an Insurance Fraud Coordination Office, and then the work that is done between the Guards, Insurance Ireland and the Alliance for Insurance Reform. All that work was not done to create high levels of profitability. It was done to create a more competitive sector for those who depend upon it, and I want to see that translated into lower prices.
But the problem here, Minister, is, and this isn't the first time I've said this, the problem is that I, on behalf of Sinn Féin and the Alliance for Insurance Reform, said that we needed commitments from the insurance industry. If these reforms were introduced, then we needed to see premiums reduced. Your party leader, your former party leader, Leo Varadkar, gave headlines to the papers like 6, 7 years ago. I'm giving the insurance industry 6 months or else. What was the or else? Because insurance premiums, just take the last 12 months, insurance premiums for motor has gone up a whopping 9%. It's now its highest that it's been in 5 years. It is more than double the European average. So what's driving these motor insurance premiums up? There is only one thing. It is profit. It is corporate greed. And they are able to do it because they have a government that isn't going to do anything about that. Despite the words of the Taoiseach 6, 7 years ago, there is no stick when it comes to this issue. That is why the insurance companies are taking a hand not only at the government but at their consumers. This is not right what is happening. So I'm asking you, what measures do you plan to take to ensure that these reforms actually mean meaningful reductions for consumers as opposed to whopping profits for the industry?
So in relation to motor insurance, yes, it is the case that the figures year to date were up 9.7%. If you look at where it was for the month of April, they were up 0.2%, and the figures are now 34.4% lower than they were at their peak in 2016. If you look at motor insurance, prices are now down by 2.2% since the implementation of the personal injuries guideline, and down 5.1% since the Cabinet Subcommittee on Insurance Reform was set up. So we have seen some developments there. And look, you're at it again, inferring that the government is doing nothing, when I've laid out what the government is doing. And what we will be doing now, in the context of myself and Minister Troy working on the new further action plan for reform, is engaging with the insurance sector and looking at what further options we need to consider. Because we have done our bit, we have played our part, so has the Oireachtas, and we need to see better value for the consumer as a result of that.
Minister, we know that the use of cheques in this country has declined dramatically, especially after COVID. It was half of what it used to be in 2023, and it's probably declined more. I don't have the up-to-date figures. So a lot of people don't have chequebooks anymore, or if they do, they're stashed away in some box somewhere, and they're not used that much. And equally, we have a lot of older people who, if they do have bank accounts, they don't have bank cards. So in this context, I'd just like to ask your views on postal orders as a means for making payments for bills with state agencies and local authorities, especially amongst those with limited IT skills, no chequebooks, whether they have a right to refuse postal orders, and whether this could be amended to your office.
Thank you very much.
Stay within the time limits,
Thank you, Deputy. I want to thank the Deputy for this question, as maintaining a variety of payment options in the state is important for the economy and for ensuring the financial inclusion of consumers who are older, on fixed or lower incomes, are at the risk of digital exclusion. The availability of non-digital payment options ensures that certain vulnerable groups are not excluded from participating in our society. That is why cash access has been ensured via the recent passed Finance Provision of Access to Cash Infrastructure Act of 2025, and why cash acceptance was recommended in the National Payment Strategy of 2024. Launched in October of 2024, the strategy recommended cash acceptance or cash facilitation in the public sector, where a public body levies fines or fees, or provides goods or services for a charge. If a body cannot accept cash directly, it must arrange for the facilitation of cash payments via a third party. In November of last year, the Secretary-General of my department wrote to all other Secretary-Generals notifying them of this recommendation. Government departments and bodies under their aegis will be required to confirm via their annual reports that they are in compliance with this recommendation. It is my view that postal orders fall within the scope of facilitating cash payments via a third party, and postal orders accepted by a number of local authorities and state agencies such as the Revenue. If the Deputy would like more information on the volume, use and operation of postal orders, Post is the appropriate body to query, and I will certainly raise this matter with them because I accept that the point you're raising is an important one.
I suppose what I'm more interested in is, Minister, you raising it with the agencies. For example, South Dublin County Council has a cash office in Tala and Clondalkin, but a lot of people who only have public transport would find it very hard to follow those means. And I want to give the specific example where resident parking permits for an area for older people that would be paid through South Dublin Parking Services. When a resident was trying to make an arrangement to do this, they were told on the phone, sorry, cheques only, we're not accepting postal orders. Now, I acknowledge this was a contractor acting on behalf of a local government agency, but there seems to be a miscommunication at that point, because I've heard other stories from other agencies that don't have the time to go through it, but I think maybe a communication should be issued to explicitly state that postal orders should always be accepted as legal tender in these cases.
Thanks, Deputy. I'll raise that matter with the Minister for Housing. The information that I have available to me does cover off where we are with our state agencies, but doesn't deal with the local authorities and the level that you've just referred to, and in particular that issue. I will raise it, like I do accept for our more elderly citizens who need to use local authorities and other services, not being able to use cash broadly for them can be more than an issue of convenience. And I will, as I said, follow up on this with the Minister for Housing and revert back to you.
Okay. Bogam Oireachtas mar sin go ceiste cethair in anam an teachta Doherty, and just remind the one person to stand in the chamber time. Teachta Doherty.
Ara, I'm asking you to outline the surplus that the state will run in 2025 and to make a statement in the matter, and that's in the context of your government ruling out a cost of living package in the budget. We've heard it from yourself, from the Taoiseach. And I think it's a reflection, I think, of a government that is out of touch, that you do not understand the real pressures that ordinary people are under. And this is despite that billions of surplus has been recorded not only this year but also in previous years. And people are really struggling because the actions of the government have left them in some cases high and dry.
So when it comes to inflation, it's important to emphasise that the reason so many are still struggling with it, and I do accept it's a challenge for so many, is not because of the actions of the government. Inflation within our economy and the way it has gone up has not been caused by the Government of Ireland. It has been caused by factors that are outside of our control in many cases. I refer to the cost of energy. I refer to what has happened with supply chains across the world. To answer the Deputy's question, we are currently projecting, and I say currently, a general government surplus for this year of €8.7 billion, nearly all of which is caused by the corporate tax receipts that this House, or most people in this House, including, I believe, Deputy Doherty, have always acknowledged are highly volatile and we can't depend upon. The reason why I'm saying that we can't do the kind of one-off measures that we have done in the past again is because while the cost of living is still high, the rate of inflation that we have seen that justified us doing those packages has fallen dramatically. When we brought in the various large cost of living measures, it was done in the anticipation that they would be one-off. That turned out not to be the case. But what has turned out to be the case is that inflation has fallen. We were in a situation where inflation was well in excess of 10%, was growing so quickly, and now it is, I hope, going to be between 1% and 2% at a far more normal level. I accept that prices are high. I accept that this is a challenge for so many, but the rate of price increases has fallen dramatically, and what the government will then aim to do is provide the support that we normally do through, for example, social welfare measures that feature in every budget, as opposed to the repetition of measures which, if they become normal, I'm concerned won't be affordable.
Minister, look, some inflation is absolutely beyond our control. Other high prices are as a result of price gouging or government failures. We've seen our pillar banks combined profits of €5 billion last year. Much of that has come from the fact that homeowners were squeezed and savers were shortchanged. We have double-digit rent increases. New rents outside Dublin are rising by 9%, with 12 counties experiencing increases of double-digit rent inflation. That's because the government won't enact our legislation to ban rent increases. We have crippling childcare costs, despite your government's commitment to reduce childcare. We still don't have a plan. Your party promised a plan within 100 days. Another promise broken. We have insurance, as I said, eye-watering insurance, and government not doing anything to actually ensure that the reforms, the savings are passed on. And we have the highest costs of electricity in Europe. And it is also at a time when we will record significant surpluses in the region of 8 to 9 billion each year, and still you do leave people high and dry, because people need support at this point in time, and a cost of living package is absolutely necessary.
It's not the case to say that some inflation is caused by forces outside of our control. If you look at the inflation that we have gone through in recent years, most of it has been caused by issues that are outside of our control. What has happened with the cost of food, what has happened with the cost of energy, they are issues that have been caused by the awful war on the people of Ukraine and the huge changes that happened in supply chains and the way goods are supplied across the world after the pandemic. I do accept that there are issues that definitely contribute to the cost of living that do develop within our own economy. I accept that. But I would make the case to the Dáil here today that if on one hand we accept that the corporate tax receipts that are there are at risk, they are absolutely at risk because of all of the global issues that we are now confronting that have not been raised here in the Dáil yet today, but we did discuss in the Finance Committee last night. And it would not be proper for me to use receipts and money that I know may not be permanent to fund measures that could become permanent.
Yet it was proper for you as Minister for Finance to sign off on the first piece of legislation that you introduced, was to give a big increase to junior ministers and actually increase the number of super junior ministers, something that we are challenging in the courts. Inflation is also caused by government. When you decided to increase carbon tax, you put up the price of petrol, diesel, you put up the price of home heating oil, which you did last month, put up the price of gas, which you did last month. These are things that are under your control. When you decide not to ban rent increases, inflation goes up and families are under pressure. These are things that can be under your control if a government would intervene. So, given the fact that you have not done these issues, families are struggling now. We see from the CSO, we see from surveys from St Vincent de Paul and others that there are many families who simply cannot even put a hot dinner on the table. So I am asking you, in the context of this year and next year recording surpluses in excess of what, €17 billion, that there would be a cost of living package, not to spend €17 billion on a cost of living package, but recognise that people have been shortchanged by your government and that there is a need for a cost of living package in this year's budget.
So, referring to being shortchanged, if you look at the measures that the government has brought in recent years, the various one-off measures that were brought in on budget day did make a difference to people at a time in which the cost of living was so high and inflation was going up. In relation to the carbon tax that you're referring to, it's also the case that that carbon tax funded the allocation of €951 million to various measures that are helping not only with fuel poverty, but are helping us transition to a lower carbon future. And every day of the week, you'll have deputies from your party call in looking for more of these measures, while you're against the taxes that pay for them. I have to be honest in acknowledging that if we want to invest more in a greener future and a lower carbon future, we need to have a way of paying for it. You don't take the same approach. You haven't explained how we would pay for it because you're against the carbon tax. And what you are proposing here is that we would use receipts that we fear might not be available to us in the future to fund permanent measures. Incidentally, if we'd been implementing your measures in the past, we wouldn't have the surplus available to us at all.
To the Minister, it concerns the Help to Buy scheme and its future direction. Minister, the programme for government commits to both retaining and revising the scheme. Given the significant rise in house prices, particularly for me in North Dublin, I'm asking whether consideration is being given to adjusting the eligibility criteria or value thresholds to ensure that the scheme remains relevant and accessible to first-time buyers of my generation.
Thanks very much, Deputy, for raising this. The Help to Buy scheme is a plan that assists first-time purchasers with the deposit if they need to buy or build a new house or apartment. It also has an aim to encourage additional supply of new homes by supporting demand. You know what Help to Buy is, so I'm not going to go into the detail of it. The scheme has supported almost 55,000 individuals or couples. The estimated value of it has been €1.2 billion, and the scheme is now extended until 2030. It is reviewed in accordance with the Department of Finance tax expenditure guidelines on a regular basis, and any revision to the scheme would have to be considered as part of the annual budget and finance bill process. So very looking forward to hearing your views in relation to the scheme. The one issue I do want to raise with you, just to kind of reiterate my own thinking on the future of the scheme, is I don't believe this scheme should be extended to second-hand homes. I appreciate this can sometimes be a difficult argument to make, but a criticism and a risk of a scheme like this is that we have to avoid it adding to the cost of new homes that are being purchased by home purchasers. And I think there is a risk that if the scheme is made available to homes that are already built, that the money that we are making available at the moment would simply go up into making them more expensive, as opposed to what I believe it does overall help with the supply of homes within a certain price bracket. So beyond that, Deputy, look forward to hearing your views on the future of the scheme.
Good morning, and I welcome the fact you just said that, but I've been meeting with developers across North Dublin. I'm meeting with developers across the country, and they told me that the Housing Finance Agency is just meeting once a month. And it's while completed buildings are sitting empty in the middle of housing crisis, there doesn't really seem to be a sense of urgency in the department. I know that housing isn't your department, but as the Minister for Finance, I just want to know, will we be increasing the amount of times that this agency meets to show people that we are serious about tackling this and to show investors into the housing crisis that Ireland can be trusted? In Dublin Bay North, I regularly hear first-time buyers who are doing their best to secure a home close to work. However, many new builds in the area now fall out of the existing eligibility cap, making the scheme inaccessible to those it was designed to support. There are not high earners or luxury properties, just ordinary people being priced out by rising market values. And that's why I'm asking, will there be a threshold change to the scheme? Thanks very much.
Thanks, Deputy. So the issue in relation to the threshold change is a matter that will be considered budget to budget. I do want to caution in relation to any changes, however, that could have an effect on affecting the price of a home, particularly at a point in which we still have so much we need to do to increase supply. In relation to the additional very important point you made there regarding the agency and its meeting, I think what that is referring to, Deputy, is the meeting of the board. And you're concerned that by only meeting once a month that it could be delaying important decisions, and I'll certainly follow up on that. I do think it's appropriate that a board does meet around once a month, but that shouldn't be a delay on important decisions being made at a time in which we need all the finance we can get to build more homes, and I will raise that matter.
That answer, Minister, and yes, it is exactly in the fact that the board is meeting once a month and developers and investors are seeing this, and it's holding up and adding a lot of costs to developers, which they don't like, which would discourage the building of homes. And I really thank the Minister for his response and welcome. The scheme is very valuable, and it is right that the scheme is being retained, and I look forward to the budget and seeing what this government will do, and I do believe a revision is needed to ensure that it reflects today's market. That includes updating the price cap and ensuring that the rules are clear and consistent. This is an opportunity to make a good scheme more responsive and fair for today's buyers, and particularly for the buyers in North Dublin.
I'm well familiar with the needs that home buyers have in the north side of Dublin and within your own constituency. And we will give consideration to this issue as part of the work that we do for the budget. But I do just want to emphasise again that a time in which supply is not building as fast as you want and I want, we would just need to be very careful that we don't make a change in a scheme that can in some way inadvertently add to the cost of homes. But as I said, we'll take it on board, consider the issue that you've raised, and definitely in the context of our exchange, I'll go back to this issue in relation to the board meetings and frequency of board meetings to ensure that it's not creating undue delay in decisions that lead to homes being built.
Bogam O'Droid, Cashniella, and Cashishay, and Anna McCarthy.
To ask the Minister of Finance further to a parliamentary question number 270 on the 18th of February 2025 to provide an update on his department's consideration of the fund sector 2030 report recommendation, and if he will make a statement on the matter, please. Thanks, Minister.
Thank you very much. And as you know, the PQ that you refer to deals with the funds review and deals with recommendations on the taxation of funds and policies. My predecessor, Minister Chambers, published the Fund Sector 2030 review, which was an important and wide-ranging piece of work. The programme for government committed to progress and publish an implementation plan for consideration in Budget 2026, because what we now know is that new technologies, the use of your phone in particular, is offering retail investors easier access to investments at lower costs. And I have heard the feedback about the need for modernisation of the existing taxation regime, and I want to acknowledge the complexities that are there in the current regime for an average investor. I think there's a real possibility at the moment that younger citizens within our country, because of the changes that are happening in technology, find it easier to make investment decisions about their own future that will help with their own economic future as well. And we do need to take a step back now and assess, do we have the right taxation regime in place for that? And is the regulatory environment around us, and in particular, the way we implement a taxation regime, is it clear enough? So we are going to consider all of this. It is likely that because there are so many recommendations within the funds review report, that the delivery of this may have to take place over quite a few different finance bills and budgets, because there's so much within it. But I recognise the growing importance of the fund sector as an employer within our economy, and I recognise that the products that they have available are being considered by more and more citizens in our country, and we do need to look at how we support that.
I want to thank the Minister for his response. I believe the fund sector review to be an important contribution to the continued success of the asset management and investment fund sector in Ireland. According to the Central Bank, approximately 162 billion was held on deposit at the end of March 2025, earning relatively little for the Irish taxpayer. Recent reports have highlighted that Irish investors are increasingly turning to foreign banks in search of higher returns and more favourable tax treatment. At the same time, there is a wide range of Irish-based funds available, but the current tax regions are reportedly discouraging investment. In this context, and given the potential economic implications for the domestic fund sector, can the Minister provide a clear timeframe for the implementation of the recommendations set out in the Funds Sector 2030 report?
Thank you very much. I'll have to just go back to the last point I made, Deputy McCarthy, that my aim is that we will be able to do this over a number of budgets and try to make progress on these matters. As you said, this is a part of our economy that is growing, and we need to see it. I believe there's a case actually for going faster within the EU overall, and they have now been raising a number of issues over a few years that we considered in a more careful and systemic way in the funds review that you've just acknowledged. And there's 42 different recommendations within it. Some of them could be quite costly, few of them are that simple. and we need to look at how over a number of budgets we can make progress on them. But it's very encouraging to hear deputies in the House, raise this sector here today, because in many constituencies across this country, they're now employing people, and this is a really big change. And that's one of the many reasons why I'll consider the points you've raised, Deputy.
Thank you again, Minister. I just want to compliment you and the Department for the work you've done so far, and I do understand your recommendations that it is a complex case and will take a number of budgets to iron out, and I appreciate that. But I thank you for your response, and again compliment the Department and all the work they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I don't have too much more to add to what the Deputy has said there. I think there's also a European background to all of this. We have so much savings within Ireland and within Europe. We need to look at how we can use those savings in a way that helps to invest in our own future and helps to fund all the big changes we need. And I do believe the fund sector have a role to play within all of that. For so long, many of us will have seen the way in which we save. We either put our money into a bank account or a post office account, and Deputy Gogarty was raising this just a few moments ago, or you use it to buy your home or another property. And these are all very kind of understandable decisions. But if you compare the way in which we save and invest to the other parts of Europe, they make investment decisions. They invest in equities, they invest in stocks, they invest in companies, and all of that helps those companies grow and then employ more people. And that link is something we need to do a lot better at in Ireland and Europe.
Minister, households, as you know, are paying a staggering €350 more on average for their energy bill, which is 30% above the European average. And during the election last November, the government claimed they were going to cut energy costs to bring relief to households in a cost of living crisis. Instead, they're going to rip away supports. You said yourself that energy payments cannot become the norm. But, Minister, do you believe that Ireland's extortionate energy costs are normal? And that's my first question to you.
Thanks very much, Deputy, for raising that. And as I said earlier on, in response to the questions from your colleague, I am well aware, and everybody in this government is well aware, of what higher energy means and higher energy costs means for all sectors of our society. The electricity and gas retail markets in Ireland operate within a regulatory regime that comes from within Europe. These markets are commercial, they're liberalised, they aim to be competitive, and they are overseen by the Commission for the Regulation of Utilities. And the government at the moment is considering, insofar as we can, regulatory decisions that could actually add to the cost of energy within our country. With regards to taxation, households are currently exempt from the electricity tax, while businesses pay €1 per unit or megawatt hour for business and non-business use. In addition to the relief for electricity for household use, there's also relief from taxation for electricity generated from renewable sources. In most cases, this is claimed at source by the supplier. This is intended to accelerate the decarbonisation of our grid and bring down the price of electricity for the consumer. Recently, the government approved an extension of the 9% VAT rate currently applied to gas and electricity until the 31st of October 2025 at a cost of €85 million. And the programme for government is really clear in recognising that we will consider and then take further decisions in this area to see what we can do to deal with the cost of energy. As I said earlier on, I do, however, need to caution against using money that we might not have available in the future to pay for measures that our country will see as becoming permanent. A tough argument to make, I know, to many, but it's an argument that I think it is important to make at the moment.
So, Minister, especially during the winter, I'm contacted in the constituency office by people who feel that the situation is out of control, people who are paying their children's allowance against their rent and forced to choose between heating, eating and paying their mortgage. And the transition to renewables, which you are pushing, should not mean that people are paying extortionate energy bills. And the government's approach, which you refer to as accelerating decarbonisation, places, in my view, a disproportionate share of the burden for transition on households through the PSO levy. So rather than trying to bring the price of electricity down, the government is continuing to push prices upwards by adding more costs. In other countries, like Germany, they use a progressive general taxation to reduce the cost of electricity, and alongside efforts to redistribute the PSO level fairly by making the larger energy users, like data centres, pay a fair share. That could make a real difference to ordinary people. But the government you said it will accelerate decarbonisation. I don't believe that that's the case, and it's unlikely, because people who are on those low incomes, it's a double punishment for them, and it's not just transition.
Deputy, am I hearing the sands shifting in Sinn Féin policy on climate again? You refer to us pushing renewables. Do you not think renewables should be playing a larger role in our energy sector? I would appreciate in the exchange that we have if you could clarify that issue. I accept that the cost of energy and the way in which our energy market is structured is causing issues and costs for households and businesses at the moment. We are looking at regulatory decisions in relation to it to see if we can change it in any way. And, but overall, you know, the decarbonisation of our energy sector is one of the biggest prospects that we have to try to reduce our carbon emissions and give us a greener, healthier, and I believe in the very long run, a healthier, more competitive Ireland. What we do need to do, which we will do, is look at measures that can help with that transition. But I go back to what I said. I don't believe it's responsible to spend money we may not have in the future.
Of course, we should be pushing towards renewable energy, but it's the way that the PSO levy is disproportionately put on low and middle income earners. That is the problem. That's unfair, and it's unlikely to accelerate decarbonisation in the households that we go to, where they have solid fuel out the front of their house and they're reliant on that. So in relation to electricity, the additional costs on household bills should be on the larger emitters. I don't see how you can possibly disagree with that. And in relation to gas and home heating oil, by halting the carbon tax increases and reversing the last 2 years of carbon taxes, where you believe that it will accelerate decarbonisation, I believe that it won't with ordinary poorer people who are reliant on solid fuels. So what I'm asking the government to do is to address energy affordability by reviewing what the way that you are tackling it, including the PSO levy and the network charges, and I hope that will have support of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and if they turn up, the regional independents, and if they continue to support the government.
Well, I just want to assure you that all the deputies that are here today on the government benches, we visit homes that use solid fuels. We all represent homes that are struggling with the higher cost of energy and that know that the cost of living is high. We understand that as well. But I think what we are aiming to do is display a greater degree of honesty to them than you are. So if the Sinn Féin policy now, because I'm really struggling to understand this, that you want a refund of the last 2 years of the carbon tax increases, is that your policy?
We believe there should not be any more. That there should not be any more carbon taxes on the people, because you're naive if you think that those people they can't afford to push to renewable energy.
I think people will just be getting more and more confused by your policy here today. You're saying you should believe there shouldn't be any more. Are you saying you believe there shouldn't be any more and there should be a refund of what happened in the past? While at the same time, Sinn Féin deputies come in every day of the week and they want more retrofitting, they want more cycleways, they want more measures to help with fuel poverty. The changes that we make in carbon tax help pay for that.
Can we... Can we just have one person talking at a time, one person standing at a time, and keep to our time? That'd be fantastic. So, to Oireachtas tógáil le chéile, an Oireachtas anam an teachta Emer Curry. So, a Hachta Curry.
Minister, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have planning guidelines from 2001 where for every 75 dwellings that are built, 20 childcare places are also to be provided. If it was happening, I don't think we would have the problems that we have in relation to childcare. Sometimes it works, and I'm sure you've seen that in your own constituency. Sometimes the builders are exempt, and sometimes they are built but they're never opened. So I'm actually looking for some realistic and affordable supports for the likes of community creches and smaller creches to make that happen.
Thank you. Well, I mean, Deputy Daly just referred to the regional independents turning up. I just want to make reference to the fact that we're here today. There's not a single member of the opposition present. Not a single member, despite their focus on speaking rights and the operation of the Dáil. In relation to the really important issues that have been raised there by Deputy Curry, I absolutely appreciate the importance of the issue that you're raising, because without the increase in the supply of childcare places, the efforts that we are making with regard to affordability that we have made, they don't have the effect that we want, because there's little point making something more affordable if the places are not there to allow homes and households to avail of it. And the Deputy will be aware of the work that the Department of Children, Disability and Equality are doing with regard to this, and the very important work that Minister Foley is doing to try to support the ongoing development and resourcing of core funding. She has a programme in place now, and her department has a programme in place, the Building Blocks Extension Grant Scheme, under which she has announced a further €25 million to deliver an additional 1,500 early learning and childcare places for 1- and 3-year-olds across our country. And I understand now that 49 community and privately operated services have now been shortlisted for that funding. It may be of interest to Deputy Curry to know, given the very important matters that she's raising, that at the moment, at least employers have access to an accelerated capital allowance scheme that includes, for example, childcare services. This scheme provides for 100% capital allowances in the first year in respect of expenditure incurred on qualifying equipment, and for an accelerated industrial buildings annual allowance on qualifying expenditure of 15% per annum for 6 years and 10% in the 7th year. And we also allow, subject to certain criteria, income of up to €15,000 per year being exempt from income tax and USC.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought he had more time. They were being grouped.
Yeah, I think you will have more time. The length of the question is 30 minutes, so you can take a bit more time there. It was just because it's the same chapter. So go ahead and we'll figure it out over here.
Okay. Thanks, Minister. At the heart of these questions lies an opportunity to link the provision of childcare places to the provision of new housing. And childcare does need a big idea that can deliver capacity at scale and value for money. I'm not interested in the big chains who can do that already. I'm interested in public supply, in supporting community creches and the providers, primarily women, who have been running our smaller, independent local facilities for years and struggle to do so. So the government is delivering new housing. Can we ensure that we are delivering childcare places in tandem with that? The mechanism that we currently have, the childcare facilities guidelines for local authorities from 2001, isn't working effectively. For every 75 dwellings, 20 childcare places are supposed to be provided. But like I said, sometimes new creche buildings are included as planning. They are built and they are open, but sometimes they aren't. So Minister, thank you for the information in relation to the capital supports, but I think this is part of a bigger overhaul of those planning guidelines to ensure that those creches aren't sitting empty like they are in my constituency, that they aren't being changed use, and that we do see more providers being able to operate in our local communities. And I'm sorry for my voice, or lack of voice.
No. Great, thanks very much, Cahirlock. So just to deal with the different issues that have been raised there. So firstly, I mean, the overall point that you're making regarding the efforts that we have to put in place to fund supply, take that on board. I mean, that is being done in two different ways at the moment. Firstly, what has happened now at local authority level is the guidelines for planning authorities in relation to childcare facilities aim to make clear what are the minimum number of childcare places that should be provided for the certain number of dwellings that may be available in a new community or new site that is being developed. And the planning aim, the planning dimension of this is getting clearer and clearer and laying out our expectations regarding what should be built. From a core funding point of view, what we are aiming to do now is to work with the childcare sector to put in place the funding to try to help with the hiring and the retention of staff. And I understand now for the 2025 to 2026 programme, a further €45 million has now been allocated to that, putting in place now a combined core funding allocation of €390 million. And I hope that now, with the implementation of the third employment regulation order, which is all about how we have the right level of pay, the right kind of standards within the sector, do lead to improvements in recruitment and retention. And then finally, Deputy, in relation to the issue of the buildings themselves, that is why we have in place this grant scheme that's overseen there by Minister Foley. As I said a moment ago, the aim of this is to deliver an additional 1,500 places. And look, I thank you for raising this. I know it's a really important issue in West Dublin and Dublin West, and we'll continue to do all we can.
Thank you, Minister. There's a lot of good in the programme for government at the moment. It does say that it's going to review these guidelines. It does commit to reviewing core funding, and it does commit to the provision of public supply. And I'm coming here today to say that there's opportunities to combine those and really come up with a big vision for the delivery of childcare in our communities. At the moment, Minister, there are exemptions to the rule of providing 20 childcare places for every 75 new dwellings. For example, one-bedroom apartments are exempt. For example, if a developer says that there is a creche nearby, then it doesn't necessarily have to include a creche in their development, even though it could be more than 75 dwellings. Excuse me. And lastly, Minister, when they are built, they are shell and core, and so they may not be affordable for those childcare providers. So I think we need to be doing what we have said in the programme for government and pulling on every lever to actually make that delivery happen. Yes, we have to review and overhaul the guidelines, but we have to ensure that when they are built, their places then follow.
Thank you very much, and I will raise these issues with Minister Foley, but I know she is aware of them, to look at the measures that we can put in place now to further increase the supply of new homes. I do look at not the supply just of new homes, but of the new childcare places that accompany those new homes. And because we have measures in place now with regard to helping with the recruitment and retention of staff. We've measures in place to try to help with the provision of childcare facilities within places of employment. We've the schemes available now to help with the capital costs in relation to the private sector providing more childcare places. And then, as you have said, we then need to look at what is the role the state can play in more actively supporting the sector in terms of the provision of places itself. I believe that the progress that we have tried to make in the affordability of childcare not only has essential social benefits and essential delivering against the need that we have to deliver against equality within the workplace, within the home. All those reasons are so important for doing it. But there's also such important additional economic reasons for doing it. At a time of full employment, it even becomes even more important to look at how we can support those who are living, who are contributing within our country, to help them to return to the workplace as well. And childcare is an essential way in which we will do that. So I do think we have an array of different measures in place that are making a difference, but absolutely, Deputy Curry, I will work with Minister Foley. I know she'll be approaching me on these issues to see what further progress that we can make. And thanks for raising this important matter today.
Move on to your question.
Minister, will you consider extending the Help to Buy scheme to include first-time buyers purchasing second-hand homes? I'm raising this question on behalf of many first-time buyers across the country. Young families, single, professional and couples who dream of owning a home but find themselves restricted by the current scope of the Help to Buy scheme. The present Help to Buy initiative provides crucial support to first-time buyers purchasing newly built homes. However, the scheme reflects a narrow view of the housing market.
Thank you very much. And I have two questions in relation to this. I propose, if I may, to take questions 9 and 20 together. The primary aim of the Help to Buy scheme is to encourage additional supply of new homes by supporting demand. It also assists first-time purchasers with a deposit if they need to buy or build a new home. The scheme provides for a refund of income tax and deposit insurance retention tax paid in Ireland over the previous 4 years, subject to the limits outlined in the legislation. Based on the latest data available from the 31st of March 2025, it has supported almost 55,000 individuals or couples to buy their own home. In addition to the conditions laid down in the scheme, including that the property is occupied as the sole or main residence of a first-time purchaser, the scheme defines a qualifying residence. The legislation is very specific as to the definition of a qualifying residence. It must be a new building which was not at any time used or suitable for use as a dwelling. If the building was non-residential but has been converted for residential use, it may qualify for Help to Buy. Renovation or the refurbishment of old homes to either upgrade or reinstate them for habitation doesn't qualify for the scheme. In relation to second-hand properties generally, an increase in the supply of new housing remains obviously a crucial aim of government. As mentioned, the Help to Buy scheme is specifically designed to encourage an increase in demand for affordable new build homes in order to encourage the construction of an additional supply of such properties. The Help to Buy scheme does include a clawback provision where the minimum occupation period of 5 years is not met. It should, of course, be borne in mind that the government has put in place many other measures in addition to Help to Buy to support first-time buyers. This includes the First Home Scheme and the Local Authority Affordable Purchase Scheme. The programme for government commits to the retention and to the revision of the Help to Buy scheme, and as deputies will appreciate, any revision to the scheme would have to be considered as part of the annual budget and finance bill process and take into account the effective operation of the scheme and impact that any changes could have on the broader housing market. And that, Deputy, cuts to the core of the point that I made to earlier on in PQs today, and to thank you for raising this issue. The very big concern that I would have, and I'd appreciate your views on this as well, is that if it was being made available to homes that have already been built, it could run the risk of making those homes more expensive and in turn making them less affordable. And I wouldn't want to see that happen. So welcome your views in relation to it. I know the Help to Buy scheme does play a very important role. I'm committed to its retention, but I do want to ensure that by having it available, it not only helps with a deposit, but it helps the new homes being built. And thanks again for raising it.
Minister, I'd just like to say that second-hand homes could be a more viable option for some first-time buyers, and these are excluded then from the financial assistance. An extension to the Help to Buy scheme would include second-hand homes, would acknowledge the reality of our housing market on the ground. An extension would widen access, especially in rural and established urban areas where new builds are limited or priced outside of the thresholds. Second-hand homes may offer more affordability, more location choices and faster availability. Supporting buyers for second-hand homes would, one, in my opinion, ease the pressure on new build sector, increase buyer choice and contribute to a more balanced housing market. Minister, we must ensure that housing supports for all first-time buyers, regardless of the type of the home they purchase. For many, Help to Buy scheme represents the difference between aspiration and reality, and between renting indefinitely and securing a home to call their own. Minister, I urge you to extend the Help to Buy scheme to second-hand homes. Why? To reflect the reality of the housing market in our towns, cities and areas, promote financial fairness and support first-time buyers in every way possible. Thank you, Minister.
Thanks, Deputy. And I know you're raising the strong views of your constituents in relation to the issue. And the whole point, one of the many points of questions like this, is for you to raise the issues that your constituents want, and for me to do my best to explain to you why we're doing or not doing what you want. As I said, Deputy, the concern that I have is that we know that in addition to the difficulties that we have with building more homes, we need to ensure that as we build more homes, they're built in a way that is also affordable. And my own considered analysis of this scheme is that any change that would make it available to homes that are already built could have a real risk of adding to house price inflation within our country, given how many second-hand homes are bought every year. But thank you for raising the issue. I'll take on board what you've said, but I do want to do you the courtesy of giving you my view on the issue at the moment.
Minister, so other improvements I urge you to consider for the Help to Buy scheme are to adjust the eligibility criteria and thresholds to reflect current house prices and inflation, and to introduce a system which would offer higher support for lower income applicants or buyers in high cost areas. That would make the scheme more equitable.
Thanks, Deputy. I think I've kind of given the view on the scheme as clearly as I can. Completely understand where you're coming from, understand why you're raising it, but as I said, I think it's really important that any changes that we make at a time in which supply is still not increasing at the speed that we want doesn't add to inflationary difficulties. But I'll take on board what you said, Deputy.
And my question to the Minister is if he will outline the amount that he intends to increase the carbon tax during the course of this government, and if he will set out very clearly what that will mean for families and workers that are facing a cost of living crisis.
Thanks very much, Deputy. So the Finance Act of 2020 legislated for annual increases in the carbon tax rate of €7.50 until 2029, and then a final increment of €6.50, bringing the rate to €100 per tonne of carbon dioxide in 2030, with current rates based on charging €63.50 per tonne of CO2 emissions. Under the programme for government, it has been agreed to continue with the planned carbon tax increases, which align with recommendations from the Climate Change Advisory Council, and to continue to use the additional revenues to fund social welfare measures, agri-environmental schemes and retrofitting. This approach encourages a shift away from fossil fuels and ensures that those who are most vulnerable receive targeted support, making the transition to a sustainable future fair and equitable. There are three separate legislative frameworks within tax law to apply the carbon taxation regime across liquid fuels, natural gas and solid fuels, the carbon component of mineral oil tax, natural gas carbon tax and the solid fuel carbon tax. The components on petrol and also diesel are legislated to increase each October up to and including 2029. The MOT rates for other liable fuels such as heating, kerosene and marked gas oil, along with the natural gas carbon tax and solid fuel carbon tax increases, will increase annually in May up to and including 2030 to allow for the winter heating system. Mineral oil tax rate increases up to the final year will annually add 1.7 cents to a litre of petrol and approximately 2 cents to a litre of diesel, heating kerosene and marked gas oil or farm diesel. The natural gas carbon tax rate increases up to 2029 will add just under €15 each year to the average household natural gas bill based on an annual usage of 11,000 kilowatt hours, and the annual solid fuel carbon tax increases up to 2029 will add 80 cents to a 40 kilogram bag of coal.
So the carbon tax is unique. There's nowhere else that we can point to in the current budget where we can say with certainty this is what government plan to do. We can't talk to our pensioners and tell them this is where your pension will be in 5 years' time, but we'll tell them how much precisely Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the champions of rural Ireland, the Healy Rays et al. Are going to increase the cost of heating their home. We can't tell motorists how much money we're going to fund in our roads network, how much we're actually going to improve transport connectivity precisely, but we can tell them exactly how much money we're going to add to their cost of driving to work. And what's worst, Minister, is that none of this actually works. The money isn't ring-fenced, despite what government protests. This is a revenue-collecting measure that disproportionately affects working-class, poor and rural households. And I have to ask you, Minister, do you accept and appreciate just how bizarre that situation is? And will you finally see sense and actually engage constructively in a way in which we can tackle environmental challenges without actually fleecing ordinary workers and families?
Minister.
This is a revenue collecting measure that pays for public services, that pays for improvements in those things that can make a difference to a greener future for Ireland. As I have said, the annual increases in carbon tax, once I put in place this measure, of it automatically going up every year, they have been ring-fenced to try to ensure that that money is used to fund the development of better infrastructure across our country, to help with the cost of fuel poverty, to fund things that we know our country needs to see happen for it to become greener and healthier and to deal with the cost of fuel poverty. And what I've also done is budget by budget made changes in social welfare payments to ensure that those who are on the lowest levels of income within our society are not affected the most by changes that are happening in carbon tax.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Carthy.
So I really would appreciate a bit of honesty from government, because it's not true to say that the carbon tax is ring-fenced. It's not. The C and the Controller and Auditor General confirmed that he could account for about 61% and be assured that that's going on environmental measures. But as with all government decisions, taxes are collected and decisions are made as to how that is spent. So to say that we need the carbon tax in order to pay for the environmental schemes probably sets out just how committed you are to those environmental schemes in the first place. But here's the problem, Minister, and you can talk about the mitigating measures and you can talk about all alleviations that are in place. But for my neighbours, families who live in rural communities who have no choice whatsoever but to use their car every single day in order to drop their kids to school or to travel to work, who have no choice but to use the home heating system in their house to heat their home. Carbon tax don't do anything for the environment. Carbon tax just make their lives harder. And I don't know what is the failure of the collective of government, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and now the rural independents, who just simply cannot appreciate and understand that.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Well, I was careful in the answer that I gave to the Deputy, because what I said is the increases in carbon taxes since I put in place this measure, which I brought in the finance bill there, as I said, of 2020, those increases have been ring-fenced. And before I put in place the increases that we're now referring to, there had been a kind of a base carbon tax that was in place, a foundation to all of this, the revenue from which is going back in to pay for public services. And you said to me that you were troubled, or that it said something about my motives, that we are using these increases in carbon tax to pay for measures that can help with the greening of our economy and our country. And likewise, your lack of commitment to these carbon tax changes raised a question for you regarding how you would pay for these measures. I understand they have an effect. I understand that there are many within our country who find it hard to pay these taxes. That is why we do put in place the social measures that I've referred to. But again, if we want to pay more and have to spend more in having a greener future, we do have to find some ways in which we can pay for it.
We move on to question 11. Deputy Ward, you're taking it on behalf of Deputy Boland.
Minister, the Future Ireland funds are obviously a very important planning instrument for the future of the economy here, particularly in light of shocks that we know are coming down the track. Can you outline for us how they're being used and what state they're at this stage?
Thank you. So the Future Ireland Fund and the Infrastructure, Climate and Nature Fund were established in 2024 following the passage of the Future Ireland Fund and the Infrastructure, Climate and Nature Fund Act through the Oireachtas. The majority of the Act commenced on the 30th of July. The funds seek to future-proof the public finances and to deal with future challenges with regard to our country becoming older, decarbonisation and the use of new technologies. As the Future Ireland Fund is a long-term savings fund, drawdowns from it will only begin from 2041. The purpose of the Climate and Nature Fund is to support the economy in times of exceptional need and to support the funding of designated environmental projects, and funding can be drawn down from 2026, and the drawing down of this is managed by the Department of Public Expenditure. Both are capitalised by annual transfers from the Exchequer, 0.8% of GDP from 2024 onwards in the case of the Future Ireland Fund, and €2 billion per annum from 2025 onwards in the case of the ICNF. Over €10 billion has already been transferred to the funds in 2024. This year's transfer to the funds was announced during Budget 2025. By the end of this year, the Future Ireland Fund will have €12.5 billion in it, and the ICNF €4 billion. So €16.5 billion overall.
Minister, thanks very much. I think it's very important to acknowledge the importance of this fund. And one of the things that you mentioned in particular then is demographic changes. We know that there is a crisis coming in terms of the shift from those who are working to those who are retired, and how the working population here is going to have to support those people. So I want to put on record, first of all, my support and acknowledgement for the importance of these funds, and the fact that they will be there in 16 or 17 years' time to deal with whatever difficulties the economy might face at that point. I wonder if I can ask you then, note what you said and the National Reserve Fund transfer into the Future Ireland funds last year. I know the NTMA is responsible for the management of these funds. How are they managed? How close an eye is kept on it on a day-to-day basis by the department? And can you say anything about where those funds are, or how you anticipate they'll develop over the next 16 to 17 years?
Thanks very much, Deputy. So the day-to-day management of it is done by the National Treasury Management Agency, as indeed you just said there a moment ago. In relation to how decisions are made in relation to it. So at the moment, what is now happening is the NTMA is actually engaged in that work. So they are currently preparing long-term investment strategies for both these particular funds that will then be subject to consultation with the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Public Expenditure. So we are currently, these strategies are currently being reviewed and then will then be signed off then by the two ministers. In terms of where we are at the moment in relation to it, the current investment strategies are being managed therefore on a low risk way and in a low risk appetite, and the funds are currently only invested in highly rated liquid strategies, securities that have a low level of inherent risk, such as the bonds of countries.
Thank you, Minister.
As we develop these strategies.
Deputy Ward.
I appreciate that, Minister, and thank you very much. I'm wondering to what extent the Department maintains an eye on the appropriateness of those financial vehicles as well in terms of any human rights element to them. I don't know whether that's a consideration or not, or whether you can say.
So, I mean, I would consider those kind of issues to be considered carefully by those who are involved in investing this money, which we are now building up. You know, we had a debate last night on this topic in the Finance Committee, you know, where I said I am reluctant to be putting in place lots of legislation in relation to this, to be kind of putting restrictions in place regarding how decisions are made by the NTMA. Because I have to say they do a really, really, really good job on our behalf in managing the various funds that we already have in place, Deputy. And instead, we have officials within my own department who are, you know, responsible for the engaging with the NTMA on strategic and operational matters. They do that very, very regularly. And then my own Secretary General sits on the board of the NTMA with the Secretary General of the Department of Public Expenditure. So on those two levels, we work with them. But to answer your question about how we deal with the investment overall, it is through authorising the long-term strategy, and that process is currently underway.
Thank you, Minister. Move on to question 12, and that's Deputy Ward again.
Minister, as you're aware, increasingly cash is something that a lot of people don't use. You'll often hear people say they don't carry cash at all anymore. They rely on credit cards and banking apps and things like that to make the payments they need to make. While that is very progressive in lots of ways, can you tell us what you're doing to ensure that cash remains something that's available for those who need to and want to use it?
Thank you, Deputy. So the Finance Provision of Access to Cash Infrastructure Act of 2025 is the result of a recommendation in the Department of Finance review of retail banking. The objectives of the Act are, as you've just referred to there, to ensure sufficient and effective access to cash in the state, to put in place a framework to manage future changes to cash infrastructure in a fair, orderly and transparent manner, and to bring cash in transit providers and independent ATM deployers within the regulatory framework of the Central Bank of Ireland. The legislation will do so by allowing the Minister for Finance to prescribe in regulations access to cash criteria with regard to December 2022 levels initially, taking account of the exits of Ulster Bank and KBC. The regions used will be eight regions of our country as defined by Eurostat, and the Act will require ATM deployers to be registered with the Central Bank of Ireland and provide the Central Bank with the regulation-making powers in relation to matters such as reporting requirements, service and other matters such as denomination stocking. The Act was only signed into law in May. Work will now begin with commencing the legislation, and I expect the key regulations to be completed in the third quarter of this year. And just to conclude by making a kind of a point to you on it, that while I am very much aware of the kind of changing attitudes in relation to the use of cash, you know, I understand that for lots of people within our country, using cash is still the main way they want to conduct our payments, and really speaks to an issue of inclusion within our financial system. And I don't see it all as being a technical matter. I see it as really important. If you find out that you're not able to pay a bill, if you find out that you're not able to use your money within a, you know, to make really important transactions, it just adds to a feeling of not being part of our financial system. I don't want to see that happen.
Deputy Ward.
Thanks, Minister. Can I start by acknowledging the fact that the government takes on board this issue? Because I think exactly as you say, it's an inclusion issue, particularly for people who might not be tech savvy or might even have bad internet coverage. The lack of cash can be a real stumbling block for them from accessing financial services and the payment of bills. So I appreciate the fact that there is a governmental and legislative acknowledgement of the importance of cash. Obviously, those who choose to use the alternative technological solutions, that's great, but we must continue to make it available to people. Small businesses tell me that sometimes dealing in cash with banks can increase their banking charges and costs. Is there any intention to impress upon the banks the need for them not to penalise businesses and individuals for choosing to use cash over electronic means of funds transfers?
I'm going to look at that issue. I am struck, despite what I've said, by the number of premises that I now walk into, like shops, cafes that say card only. And I can understand completely the benefits they get in relation to that. There are benefits to the economy overall as well, in terms of being able to record transactions and look at how tax is collected. But I do go back to the point that I agreed on there a moment ago. Not being able to use cash then to access a service is something that I am concerned about. Do want to consider it further, and I will in my next round of engagement with our banks certainly raise that issue with them, and the feeling that, as you said, that small businesses may feel in some way penalised.
Deputy Ward.
I appreciate your perspective and I appreciate your commitment to that. There are, beyond the banking sector, there are businesses who will sometimes try to dictate to their customers how they're going to affect payment for a service or a good. And some people will actually say, not just it must be a card payment, but it might be through a particular method, PayPal or whatever it might be. Would you see a role, perhaps, in regulatory terms for the government to say to businesses that they may not do that? That they must facilitate payment by multiple means, or at least more than one means, in circumstances where there could be a concern that dictating the payment must be made through a particular means would seriously restrict some people's abilities to access that good or service?
I'd be reluctant to give that commitment to you here today, because I would just need to consider, does that have any unintended consequences regarding policies that we have with regard to the legal tender of cash, which has now been developed within the European Union. But as I said to you, Deputy, I will have a look at the matter. I do want to ensure that citizens do not in any way feel excluded from our financial system, and I can't help but notice myself the growing number of shops and cafes that I walk into that say card only. That's not at all a problem for you or me. But there are some within our society for whom that can be a problem. And as I said, I don't want to see that happen.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, we move on to question 13, and that is grouped with question 21. Deputy Roach.
Margaret Cahirlock, and can I say firstly, Minister, I for one appreciate you coming into the chamber this morning to deal with the responses for some of the real genuine concerns that people have with regards to the finances. And my question to you, Minister, is where I'm asking, I suppose, maybe where you and your department intend to ensure, I suppose, that employment growth continues given the global uncertainty.
Thanks very much, Deputy. And it's always a privilege to be in here as regularly as I am to answer the important questions that deputies put to me and to respond to the Dáil. I do want to highlight where we are from a jobs point of view in Ireland. It is a really positive development in our economy overall. And if I look at where we are, total employment in the last year alone went up by 90,000 people, with the total number of people at work in our country now exceeding 2.8 million euro. 2.8 million, I should say. The unemployment rate now stands at 4%, while the number of people, the number of women at work within our country is now at a record high, and the number of young people at work within our economy is at a very, very high level as well. And Deputy, I'm sure you will remember, and I certainly do at other points, in which persistently high levels of unemployment in Ireland was an issue that government after government really struggled to make progress on. And it was a subject of much debate and research and analysis why unemployment was so high in Ireland and why we couldn't get it down with all the social misery that was then caused by that. And while I know there's still much that we need to improve on and do better on in our country, to see so many people at work is so important. Behind every one of those 2.8 million people, there is the dignity of being at work, the reward you get from it, and then the obvious contribution to your own living standards. In terms of where we are and what that means for the global environment that we're in at the moment, that really is the main challenge that the government economically faces. Regrettably, the background that helped Ireland create that level of employment for those that live within our country was a consensus in relation to the rules of global trade, of global taxation, a belief that if we integrate with each other through trade, that can deliver mutually beneficial gains for economies by getting more people at work. The House will be well aware now that that is really being contested, that President Trump is taking a very different view with regard to trade. And what we are now trying to do is, firstly, through the European Union, negotiate with the United States to see can we get a different outcome and get an agreement in relation to this. But then secondly, within our own economy, look at the measures that we can take that will sustain these high levels of employment. And I point to the work now that Minister Chambers is doing, who I know will be in shortly after me now here today, in relation to the review of the National Development Plan. I point to the work that Minister Burke is doing in relation to the competitiveness of our economy that is hugely important. And just want to recognise the work that he is putting in, particularly in the support of smaller businesses. And then the work now that Minister Lawless is doing in relation to higher and further education, and how we can look at how we can have the right level of skills within our economy and look to develop it and look to change it as technology begins to change our economies overall. So this high level of employment is a really precious gain in our economy overall. We have to look at the contribution that all agencies of our state can make to contribute in it. I see our colleague here now, Minister Moran, who will be in now talking about the Office of Public Works. And they're an example of a state agency that play a really important role in skill development within our economy and then direct employment. And we need to look at all of this now when the global environment is beginning to change so much.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Roach.
Good morning, Minister, and thanks for a very comprehensive response. And I suppose no matter where you come from, right around the island of Ireland, there are, like myself, there are representatives that are concerned about the threat to any job, particularly in the more dispersed rural villages, and everything that we can do, and I suppose as Minister for Finance that you can do would be much appreciated and of course much needed. And none of us, I suppose, were aware of what President Volatile Trump was about to do and the impact that may have on our economy. And I think, you referenced, Minister, the 2.8 million people employed and 4% unemployment. That's a resounding, I suppose, testimony of how things are going in this country, and I applaud you for your continued and relentless efforts in that regard.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. So yes, indeed what we need to do is just look at all the different policies that are available to government, to look at how we can make more progress in this area. I'm well aware, for example, from being, with you, Deputy, there a number of months ago there, I've been out and about with you in the many towns that you represent within your constituency and seen the variety of employers that are located there. And because we now have such a diverse set of employers within Ireland, we need to kind of take a step back and say, what are the broad things that we can do to help them all? And I'm convinced it continues to be to have a stable economy that people have confidence in, have confidence that we can continue to invest, that we can avoid significant cutbacks or changes in how we spend the country's money, and then sector by sector, look at particular measures that we can have in place then that will then help with the growth of those sectors, whether that be tourism, all the way through then to the very big employers that make such a difference to our country that we're going to have to really work hard to support.
Deputy Roach.
Thank you once again, Minister. And of course, in East Galway, we're very blessed and very fortunate to have the announcement of Dexcom that it's at a pretty advanced stage right now with regards to their development in Athenry and the many people that they plan to employ, and that's really welcome. And of course, Minister, that's, where it's fair to say most of us understand that some institutions or some companies are better insulated against the tariffs, the proposed tariffs, than of course others. But I'm heartened to hear, Minister, your plans with your department in relation to how that employment can be safeguarded, and of course the measures that you have taken or considering with regards to further ensuring that there's no threat on those that we have employed.
Minister.
Thanks very much, Deputy. And look, again, I just want to agree with what you have said there. And look, and you've just said it, this is a really, really important achievement that this government has to now try to sustain. The Ireland that I began my education in did not have these levels of employment. And while there is so much that we know we need to do better on, and every TD in the government is aware of all of the difficulties that we have, that we're committed to trying to improve. At the same time, having so many people at work in Ireland is not only good for those who are in the jobs, but then it creates the resources that we need that in turn allow us to invest and spend. And this is why the government now has a number of decisions ahead of us. The work that Minister Chambers here is doing in relation to the National Development Plan, the work that Minister Burke is doing, and then the important work of Minister Lawrence.
That brings